All right.
Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art in both the performing arts and the business world. Week by week, we're following Anthony Mangone, owner of Trattoria 632 in Purchase, New York, as he navigates the internal struggles and external circumstances that impact the development of his restaurant business. Last week, Anthony explained the evolution of his decisions with regard to alcoholic beverages, interior design, entertainment, lunch and pre-theater service, and point-of-sale technology. Then we began to get a bird's eye view of what it's like to be a sole proprietor. This week, Anthony will give us even more insight into his life as a sole proprietor. And then we're going to get a great introduction to restaurant operations as he takes us through a typical 24-hour period in the life of the restaurant. So Anthony, we know your days are really long and taxing, and you have told me that it's imperative that you sustain enough energy to be able to connect and engage with your customers all through the night till the last one leaves at closing time. How do you do that?
It requires a lot of energy. It requires just, at some point in time, your body becomes used to it. It's like training. It's like, when you go in a marathon runner will put on, they'll run for a long period of time, and then their lungs just become active and they know how they're going to perform. It's the same thing here in the restaurant business. Every day, the amount of energy you're going to need to get through the day. Okay. And a lot of days, it's exhausting. It's you don't want to be here at certain nights just because you want to be home with your family,
Sure.
You just need to shut it down. But ultimately, it's your responsibility. It's a small business. It requires a lot of attention, and it's a business that's a hands-on business. Right. And it requires you to, as we said many times before, to try to touch every customer that comes in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you really have to leave your problems at the door.
Well, I found an analogy you once used with me interesting. You said this is like the theater, and you're on stage, and you and your staff are performers.
It's exactly what it is. That is, and I guess that's why there are a lot of people in the performing arts section that are also waiters and waitresses.
Good point.
And
yes.
It requires you to, I think I at one point used the word malleable. You have to be able to adjust yourself and be almost like a chameleon with certain people. Engaging, interactive, and I think that each person that works here feeds off one another in how we interact with people. You've been here before. You'll see our team members are shaking hands. They're hugging people. They're asking about their most recent trips. We had a couple that came in yesterday. They flew in to Westchester Airport from Disney, and they stopped here, and we knew they were in Disney. And just engaging with their daughter about her trip to Disney creates a sense of, we're not just doing this for, fun here. We really, truly are concerned about your well-being. We knew you were on a trip. We wanted to hear about it.
Right.
And I think it lends well to the whole family atmosphere here.
Exactly. Now, you just said something that leads me to my next question, which is you often talk about the importance of leaving your problems at the door so that you can focus completely on the customer and the needs at hand. But of course, we're all human. So in reality, How do you accomplish that?
It requires you to compartmentalize your problems, whether it be personal or related to the job for that particular day. I mean, on any given day, we may have 10 different issues that we're dealing with, but we're not going to go over to a table and explain our tale of woe. No one wants to hear that, certainly.
Sure.
But I think I had one time mentioned this before, that Des years ago we were in a staff meeting, and she said that everyone has to leave their problems at the door when they walk through the door here, because people don't want to hear it. They want to see someone who's happy. And I have one particular instance now where one of our team members is dealing with a personal illness that he's been dealing with. Yet he's here every day with a smile on. You would never know he's got the issue. He's engaging with the customers, but he's dealing with it. He's dealing with it on his days off, going to see doctors and all. And I think that's a testament to each person that's part of our team, that they're able to detach themselves from what they're dealing with personally and be able to come in here and engage our customers the way that they do.
And then connecting that with what you said about energy, I wonder if maybe part of the secret sauce, as it were, is the communal energy of the staff, truly the communal energy of the entire operation facilitates the ability to keep that energy up, perhaps, and to compartmentalize and what am I trying to say? Delve into your role.
Yes, I think, as I said before, each person, I think, feeds off of one another, and they pick each other up as well. Yeah. So I think that's important also, right? And
yes,
if someone's having a tough day, and maybe that person is not as attentive as they should be, or maybe not able to perform certain tasks as well or as quickly as they're normally accustomed to doing, because they're dealing with a personal problem, or they have an issue at home that they're dealing with. It's an emotional issue. And you pick that person up, and I think that's what makes our team, in some instances, unique. Yeah. I really believe that, and that's not to throw shade at any other restaurant or any other small business, but I think in this particular instance, we all seem to feed off one another.
Right, and it's clear to, I think, every customer who walks through the door.
We hope so.
Now, when you experience fluctuations in business volume, how do you adjust if you don't reduce your labor costs?
Well, obviously we went through a very difficult time, obviously during the pandemic, and that was clearly unforeseen circumstances. Mm-hmm. So there had to be adjustments in the cost of labor, whether that meant cutting people's hours or, in some instances, just eliminating certain positions until we got back to normal. But in most instances, when there is a fluctuation in business, although we tend to be very consistent in how we operate and we staff accordingly, but a lot of times what happens, particularly in this business, is if it's a slow day, the owner is sitting there and he's looking at his cash register and it's not ringing, he'll start sending people home. We've never engaged in that.
Right.
And the reason being is, I guess maybe properly, just from my perspective, having come from a corporate background, you wouldn't see an employer turning around, or a manager sending people home because it might have been a slow day. They just don't do that. You're gonna deal with certain instances, and we try not to send people home, because if we send them home, and that person feels that they didn't make money that particular day, I don't think it's going to really breed a good form of loyalty to us. Mm-hmm. And in all likelihood, when they're home that afternoon, they're going to be looking for a new job. So we try and even it's to the detriment of my bottom line, I always believe that in the end, it'll make itself up.
That's right.
And that's what I've always found such a hard time understanding with other owners, is that, okay, yeah, it might be slow on that one particular weekend. and you're going to cut that person and they're not going to make any money, you're breeding contempt with that person. But then when it's really busy, you expect that person to operate, at optimal capacity. And I just think that there's something inherently wrong with that, and it certainly doesn't help, breed loyalty amongst your team.
Absolutely. Now, what are the implications then for the times that you are very busy? What then do you expect of your employees?
I do expect everyone to step up their game, and we try not to sit there and do a lot of large meetings. I tend to think that those are, in some instances, just a lot of hot air being blown about. I'd much rather deal with a person one-on-one when I see a circumstance happening and explain to them what the expectation level is, or actually read the room and understand what's coming in that particular night and say, this is what I need you to be able to accomplish this evening in this period of time, because we're looking at all the different machinations that are going on here, and we need to make sure everything runs with symmetry. And so we want to make sure that if a table is sitting down at 5:45, that we need to turn that table in a 2-hour time period. Let's make sure that, sort of like what we spoke about last time, let's make sure that if a person's going to a show, we have them out of here by 7:30 in order to get to the show on time. So it requires not a lot of large team meetings. I try to do things on an individual basis so that they understand that I am focused on them, and that it's not just that I'm in a meeting and I'm sending out a message to the masses.
How then do you determine when robust volume actually calls for increased staffing? In other words, when it becomes clear that it is too much for the team to handle, even if they step up their game?
It happens, where you get caught flat-footed sometimes. About 2 weeks ago on a Sunday, we had our staff in. It was our normal staffing on a Sunday, and we just got overwhelmed. And I was actually at a party, and I was called by someone here saying, "You need to get here."
Oh,
it just became, there were no reservations in the book. The people just came in, and it just was one of those days where you get caught flat-footed. And on those particular days, there's going to be some sins that you have to cover up, because there's going to be people that maybe didn't get their meal in a timely fashion, or a delivery in a timely fashion, only because there is only so much bandwidth that you have in a kitchen or with servers that can handle the amount of people that come through the door, or the amount of deliveries that come through the door. So those are rare, those instances, because
thank God.
Thank God, right? But Friday evenings, particularly here, and I should say on most Friday evenings, people don't, for whatever reason, don't make reservations. And it's more of a walk-in. And I think it's probably people are finishing the week at work, and they're just going out more casually than, I'd say, on a Saturday night, where it's more reservations and very little walk-ins. And I tell you, it's so cyclical, this business, that you just know what to anticipate. And when you're here now 11 years, you're able to fall into patterns, and those patterns are helpful in determining what your staffing needs are going to be.
And if your study of those cycles, for example, tells you that it's likely, for example, this coming Saturday is going to be a big one, and you actually need extra people, will you call in folks who don't normally work on a Saturday to come in?
Yes.
And
It happened this past Saturday, for instance.
Okay.
We looked at the reservations. They were coming in a larger volume than normal. Mm-hmm. So we called in 2 extra people Saturday evening, and we then started to see the same thing was happening on Sunday. And so that we didn't get caught flat-footed like we had 2 or 3 weeks ago,
Right.
we brought in extra people for Sunday as well. And I think it was just a lot. I think it might have been Parents' Weekend at the university across the street. And so you have people that are now coming in, they're going to see their children, maybe coming in afterwards for dinner. And I think that's what transpired this past weekend. But yes, on those particular instances, we'll ask for extra people to come in, provided we have them. We're in a very difficult labor shortage right now in this country,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
which was totally unanticipated when I believe the pandemic first started. When you saw all of these people that were left unemployed,
Yes.
the anticipation on my side was there's going to be a glut of employees out there that just want to come to work, and it was actually to the contrary. So that was unanticipated.
But fortunately, I'm thinking of your approach to training employees in which they learn to wear multiple hats. And I assume then in this kind of instance, that really pays off when maybe you have to shuffle people around in terms of their duties for the evening.
Correct.
And so forth.
Absolutely. If I hadn't said it before, one of the most important positions here at the restaurant, I believe, is our host or hostess. They are the
Right.
literal first line of defense when someone comes in, or the first person to make a phone call. When the phone rings, they're usually the person to pick up the phone.
Right.
So when someone starts with us new, whether they're going to be a server or a bartender or a delivery person, we try and keep that person on the phones, knowing that that person is going to be answering perhaps for reservations, perhaps taking a delivery order, interacting with a customer, knowing that that interaction, you'll be able to tell a lot how they're going to treat a table. So, but what that also does is it gets them acclimated with the moving parts that we have here.
Right.
And so that they understand that they're not going to be regimented. As we said, we try not to have anybody regimented, but to be able to wear multiple hats.
Exactly.
If I need someone to come off the floor and go take a delivery because all my delivery personnel is out, they're going to do it because, as I've said very often, it's important that that person get their food, that the food is good, that they get it in a timely fashion, because that person may be coming back in later in the week to sit at a table,
That's right.
provided they had a good experience. So we try and wear multiple hats here, and I think everyone has bought in to that philosophy, and they realize the trickle-down effect of the benefit to doing it that way.
Exactly. And when I am here, I see that in action.
Yeah, I mean,
all the time. It's just automatic. It's not even a question of necessarily. Sometimes it may be an actual request, but they proactively spot needs, it
Correct.
seems to me, and then respond.
And it's critical, and there are certain people though that they come in to try and work, and they're so accustomed to that very regimented silo that they worked in other places that it's difficult for them to acclimate, because in their mindset they're like, well, no, I don't answer the phone, they have someone answer phones, or I don't bring bread to a table, I have someone else that's able to do it. And we just don't follow that philosophy here. It's all hands on deck.
Exactly. Now, you've described the restaurant business as unforgiving, that you're essentially only as good as your last meal. Anthony, how do you handle that kind of relentless pressure?
It's and believe me, it's as close to home as you can imagine. It is very unforgiving. People don't take into consideration historically what you try and accomplish here. It's just,
Sure.
and it is unfortunate.
Yeah.
It is unfortunate. You can do 10 things right, have 10 great occasions for a particular customer, and they have one bad circumstance, and they'll tell you they're not going to come back again. We've had those instances where we've tried to recover the relationship, and then in certain instances where you just can't. And comes to mind is just back in the summer, we had a circumstance where we had a very, very, very good customer that was here probably 3 or 4 nights a week.
Wow.
Yeah, 3 or 4 nights a week, maybe more. And it was a Saturday evening. They were sitting down. Another table was sitting next to them. They had we brought out the entrees for the table next to them, and the customer just was relentless in terms of badgering the server as to why they hadn't been served yet. And I happened to have been working in the kitchen. The server came in and said, "Where's their food?" I said, the ticket that you sent back has a time on it, the timestamp. You just sent it 11 minutes ago. We have to, cook the food." And they just really want the food. I sent over our hostess. She went over to speak to them, and she said, "Don't even make the food. They don't want it. They're leaving." And when I learned of who the customer was, I was in shock. Fortunately, we called the customer. We heard what their complaint was, and their complaint was that the other people had received their entrees before them, and they felt that they should have gotten their entrees. And we did a little investigation, and we explained to them, "Look, here are the tickets. You guys ordered appetizers, so we had to get the appetizers to you first. They didn't order appetizers." And once we explained it to them, they were fine. But then there are other customers, there's no explanation that you can give them. And we had an instance that I'll never forget. A couple that came in, they would come in every Saturday. They wanted to sit at 5:30 in the afternoon, and they would sit for 3.5 hours at the table. And it was on a particular evening where we just had no other place to put people. Mm-hmm. And we had gone over to the table and we had asked them, would it be okay if after they had been there, it was already past 8 p.m., would it be okay if we were able to move you to the bar area? We'd love to buy you dessert and coffee, another one. If that would be okay, because we were just overwhelmed this evening, and we didn't do it in an offensive way. We actually did it in a very cordial way. They called back on that Monday and said they would never come back again. And I just felt that was very unforgiving, particularly that we tried to do everything correctly,
right,
not offensively. It wasn't that the person was sitting there 45 minutes and we were trying to give them the rush. We just literally needed the tables. We had run out of tables. So it is very unforgiving, and that's what makes it difficult, because when you walk through the door, there is a heightened sense of awareness of everything that must go right in order for everyone to leave happy. And that could very well mean, by the way, a customer who is sitting there and they don't like the table that's sitting next to them, that might be too loud.
Right.
And they had a bad experience. We can't control that. We can go over and say, would you mind lowering it a little bit or whatever? But then you might be offending that group as well.
Right.
So
it's a
and so how do you put a barometer on a circumstance like that as to what we did to make that person have a poor experience? We don't. We had no hands on it.
Right.
We couldn't control it.
Right.
Just so happened to be where they were seated, they had a bad experience, and as a result of that bad experience, didn't want to go back.
Right. Well, do you think, to a certain extent, part of the context here is the area that you operate in, which is, as you have described, upper middle class? There is a pretty substantial sense of entitlement, I think, that often comes with those in that stratum, and I wonder if you're not exempt from the effects of dealing with folks who expect their needs to be met when they want them met and in a particular way, and there's no consciousness of anything outside that.
Undoubtedly. I think that the area requires, this particular area, as we have said before, upper middle class, a lot of successful people that live in the area in terms of their businesses. They have a certain mindset that they want things when they want them.
Right.
And they're not really looking for excuses or looking for or have an understanding of what your particular choke point is, and that you may not be able to get something out the way they want it at that particular moment. It's of no moment to them.
Right.
It doesn't matter. And that's the downside of this business. That really is. And that's something that, you'll speak to other restaurateurs and they'll sit there and they'll explain the same, particularly in this area, the same circumstance that they're dealing with. Explaining to a customer they can't come at 7:30 when you call at 7:15 on a Saturday evening because there just is no availability, and they're angry in some instances. And you sit there and you don't want to sit there and engage in an argument with them, and you hope that common sense will prevail, but in some instances it just doesn't. And that, I think, comes as a result of the entitlement. And again, that's nothing that we can do as owners to resolve that, except try and be as accommodating as possible. And we really, really try and bend over backwards for people with special circumstances, special orders. Try to treat everybody like a VIP, but in certain instances, like I said the word before, bandwidth. There's only so many. There's a finite number of tables. There's a finite number of chairs. There's a finite number of hours that we're open where the people want to come in. And there's only so many dishes that I can get out at a certain period of time. But when you go out and you are going out for entertainment that evening and you're going out with friends, you're not taking that into consideration.
Absolutely not.
And nor do I expect people to. What I do expect people to do is to at least be courteous and at least understanding that if you call at 7:15, you may not get a 7:30 reservation. That is just, we hope that common sense prevails, but in certain instances it just doesn't.
And can you kind of say to yourself, okay, the disgruntled, entitled person may be the cost of doing business, as it were, that it's going to happen. There's not a lot you can do. You've already been over backwards and you've explained, the great lengths you go to take care of needs, but there is a limit. And can you, I think I wrote down something very interesting you had said at one time to me, that you were coming to realize that you can't let customers steamroll you.
Yes.
So there's a fine line here.
Yeah, I would say in the past 24 months, maybe 30 months, it used to adversely affect me a lot more, where I would let it affect me emotionally, and it would damage my personality as the evening went on, because I would daunt on me if a person, we just couldn't satisfy them. I've come to the point now where I think that, again, I rely upon our historical record in terms of what we've done. I look at the fact that the business has only grown, and that you're just not going to be able to satisfy everyone. And there has to come a point where you don't allow the customer to just steamroll you, because what happens in those instances, understand the trickle-down effect here.
Right.
The trickle-down effect is some other person who is not being as relentless is being adversely affected when you're operating all your time and concentrating all your time on trying to make that person happy, and it's unfair.
Right.
So we've come, particularly during the pandemic period, we've come to understand and appreciate more those people that come in, if not more than, say, a person who believes that they are entitled to those special treatments, and never say a word. And you follow me? It's they never ask for anything. They never complain, even if a situation where we were wrong, where we might have screwed up a dish. It's never where they sit there and they want someone to come out and really go above and beyond our normal course. They just want, they'll just chalk it up as, it was a bad experience, but we'll be back because we know what you guys have done for us over a period of time. And I would hope that most of the people that come here have given us that benefit of the doubt. In some instances, it does not matter. Like I told you, those 2 instances I just gave you, it does not matter. It does not matter what your historical record was. They only rely upon that one circumstance, and they allowed that one circumstance to not come back. So it's an unforgiving business.
It is. I mean, it's as if they're holding you hostage.
Yeah.
In a manner of speaking. So
it is.
Tricky navigating that.
Absolutely.
We're now going to move into our 24 hours at Trattoria 632 part of the Videocast. And we're going to go through a typical 24-hour period of time from a Thursday night to a Friday night, so we can better understand how Anthony anticipates, plans, and manages all the moving parts that constitute the business operation. So, Anthony, why don't we begin on a Thursday night when you are looking at buying products for the weekend?
Sure.
How does that work?
Well, first, in some instances, I wish there was 25 hours in a day, because it would help give us a little bit more time. But typically what we like to do is by Thursday, we like to know what our weekend specials are going to be. Okay. And in anticipation of that, we have to make sure that we've contacted the respective markets to make sure that they have the product available. And we want to make sure that it's going to be here for preparation on Friday morning. So we will lay out our menu. We will determine which ingredients are needed that are not in-house. Right. And then my kitchen team will give me a list of what they'll need in order to execute on our weekend specials. So again, it would have to last. We'd have to have enough product for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Fish markets are not open on Sunday. So you need to make sure that you have your enough fish to make sure you get yourself through Sunday. So it requires you to look at your reservations, be able to determine how many seats that you have that are already coming in, and then calculate how many walk-ins you customarily will do on a Saturday evening, and then say to yourself, in order for us to accomplish that, and we want to make sure for instance, we have 25 of each special, we're going to need X amount of ingredients in order to get through that 3-day period. Okay. And so there are cutoff times with certain markets. The fish market is 10 p.m. I have to have my orders in, and the produce is midnight. And then, of course, whatever I'm not able to order in a timely fashion because someone forgot something, which is going to happen. It used to get me crazy, but I don't get crazy over it anymore. It's going to happen. It's part of the business. I then go out and I shop at the market myself, and that day starts real early for me the following day. If they send me the list too late, I need to figure out alternatives to figure out where I'm going to go and physically go myself and shop. So my day, then we get those orders in. We know what the menu is going to be for the weekend. My day on Friday starts 5:30 in the morning. I'm out the door at the market, making sure we're satisfying the rest of the inventory list that we're going to need. As I said before, the last thing you want to do is have too much of a product and inventory sits dead on your shelves. Right. A lot of the stuff is perishable, so you can't buy too much of it because otherwise it goes bad, and then that's not a good situation, of course. And so that morning starts real early for me. Fridays are particularly hectic here because it's payroll day. It's going to be busy with deliveries. It's going to be busy with respect to the bar. So you need to make sure that all your inventory is available and make sure there are no mistakes. So that's typically what we try to make sure happens on a Friday, making sure all the inventory is available so that the team could then execute their plan.
And also on the Thursday night, your bartenders order their inventory
They,
as well?
they have to make sure by Thursday afternoon. They have to make sure by Thursday afternoon that they have all of the spirits and wines that they need. They have to have that order in. The cutoff time on that is 5 p.m. So it requires not just come in and get behind the bar and start, pouring drinks. There's anticipation necessary. And again, while I'll delegate those authorities in terms of ordering, I do want to make sure I review the list so that this way I could say, no, you don't really need that, or did you forget Zambuca? I try and delegate the authority of ordering, but I do want to have my last eyes on it, just so that I know that we're not over ordering something or forgetting something.
Now, when that preparation for the inventory part of the evening is complete, you then move on to determining your staffing needs for the upcoming week. That's
correct. So, we determine our staffing for, if needed, making sure that there's proper staffing for the weekend.
Right.
And then we're setting the schedule for the following week, so that everyone knows when they're working. We try to have set days. I had this conversation with someone who works here, and they wanted to keep moving days around, and I said, look, when I have to move your day, it means that I have to move someone else's day. And people have schedules, and they want to know if it's going to be Tuesday and Wednesday that I'm off. I want to know every Tuesday and Wednesday. I could set up my week.
That's right.
2 or 3 weeks out in advance, and maybe schedule a doctor's appointment or some other appointment for childcare. So I try to keep the days set with everyone's understanding that there may be a time where we're going to be extraordinarily busy, and as a result, we need to move the schedule around a little bit. And I very rarely will get any type of resistance when that happens, only because I think we've been overly fair and equitable over the years, and with most of the people that have been here for a long time, that they understand that this is not a weekly occurrence where we're imposing on their time to change their schedule around.
Exactly. Now, we're at Friday morning at what, for me at least, is the crack of dawn, and Anthony, as he said, is up very, very early to be at the Portchester
Restaurant
Depot
yes.
by 6:30.
No, 6. They open at 6, so I'm there at 6.
Oh,
I'm there when they open the doors.
Oh, that's even worse. Okay. So you're there so that you can have your pick of
That's correct.
We
want to. You're able to go and inspect every product there, but you're doing it yourself. There's lifting of boxes. It's you're walking in a freezer that is extraordinarily cold, and so just imagine like when the winter time is here and it's really cold out, and then you're walking into a freezer that's really cold. So it's challenging to say the least. It's nothing exotic, and again, it's when people are here at nighttime, and I might be sitting down and enjoying a glass of wine with them. There is a certain, I guess, to a customer's eyes, there's something glamorous about the restaurant business.
Yes.
And I often say, I wish these same people who think it's so glamorous can be with me at 6 o'clock in the morning when, you're in a produce freezer and you're, lifting heavy boxes and then making sure that you're getting it back here and you're unloading, getting it into your shelving, and so that's the part that nobody sees under the when they say under the hood.
Under the hood, which is
this is what
this
is.
Now.
This is under the hood, and
you're getting everything that cannot be delivered.
That's correct.
That you ordered the previous evening.
Previous evening, and No, during the week, there's also a lot of shopping that goes on as well, but we're talking about this particular time period because we know there's certain markets that, like I just said, the fish market is not open on Sundays. They want to make sure that they have enough to get through Sunday, so we have to make sure that gets in. But we are out, early so that for a few reasons. One, we want to make sure that we're there, we're getting first pick of anything that's coming off the proverbial trucks, and it's being stocked there. Secondly, when I first opened, I had a partner who was doing the shopping, and he would show up at 11:30, 12 o'clock with the inventory. It doesn't help for a few reasons. For perception reasons, it doesn't help for your team to see you starting your day at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the first perception problem.
Right.
The second problem is that my guys get in here early, and they start prepping early.
Right.
If they have to wait till 12 o'clock and they're serving a lunch crowd and the product is just getting here, they're not going to be prepared.
Right.
And the preparation portion of this business is critical, absolutely critical to executing in a effective and timely way. And we do a great job at that. And again, that's another under the hood circumstance where the customer won't realize that, but it's the prep that they do in anticipation of a weekend that makes everything flow as if it's natural.
That's exactly right.
And I used the word the last time, controlled chaos. It is controlled chaos when the evening is in place or the lunch is in place. However, in order to effectively migrate through that anarchy, there has to be proper preparation. And it starts with making sure the basic ingredients are here in a timely fashion.
Exactly.
And we've hired some new kitchen personnel, and one of the people said to me, you're there so early, you get there at the Restaurant Depot at 6 o'clock? And I say, yeah. And I said, why? He says, why? I said, so that when you guys get here at 10:30, there's for a couple of reasons. It's here already. There's no excuses that you couldn't get something done because we made sure that it was here for you. So that's the thought process that goes through my mind in terms of making sure that in order to migrate through the anarchy, we have to be prepared.
And you're setting the example as to how to go about doing that.
Correct. And it again, that goes for each section here, right? We want to make sure that the liquor is ordered so that it can be delivered in a timely fashion on Friday to make sure that you don't miss anything. Fridays are notorious for being a very busy delivery evening. Well, if your team is not prepared and they don't have enough pizza boxes, for example, made, just imagine the anarchy of having to make pizza boxes on a Friday evening when you have people walking in, picking up food. And so you want to make sure all your boxes are prepared. You want to make sure all of your outgoing utensils are prepared. All of those things are necessary, that you have enough packaging to send out delivery orders. If you're not prepared, it will cause anarchy. If you have to first go and look for the packaging to send out delivery orders,
right,
it cuts down on your time. And this is we said it before, it requires it to run with symmetry and precision in order for you, the customer, to leave happy.
That's right.
Or you, the customer, to get their delivery in a timely fashion. It is critical. And those are the under the hood items that most people don't realize when they walk through the door.
Of course. And in fact, unless you are educated in the business, how could you?
You don't.
You don't know. And even as you said once to me, you have to ensure on a Thursday evening, or you have to take a look at the register and make sure you have enough cash because the banks are then closed on the weekend.
Correct.
So Friday you go and get what you need.
We're going to need to make sure, and it's make sure you have enough change, and you don't want to be out Saturday afternoon, trying to chase down, enough that you have enough singles.
Right.
You're going to have delivery guys who need change when they go to customers' houses, although credit cards have become a lot more prevalent, particularly now during the pandemic. You still want to make sure that you have that availability.
Right.
You know that you need to do your payroll, and that's time consuming. That requires you to look at the week and look at what the tips were that you need to make sure that you provide to your team, calculate what's owed. Part of it, we're fortunate enough to have a payroll company that they're able to prepare certain parts of it. But at the end of the week, you need to adjust your accounts, right? You need to make sure that there's enough cash on hand, also to make sure you can fund your payroll. There's a lot of people in this business that it's notorious in this business where owners don't pay their employees every week. And I've had people who have come to me that said, at my last job I didn't get paid for 6 weeks. I say, how did you not get paid for 6 weeks? And it's because in these small businesses, particularly what we've experienced over the past year and a half, these owners are juggling money. It becomes a juggling act, and it's sad, it is, and they maybe have a problem with managing finances, or they needed money for their own personal household, and as a result, underfunded their payroll. And I could tell you that is a very, very big problem in the restaurant industry. Owners not paying tips to staff, undercutting the tips. I mean, the lawsuits are all over in this industry, particularly in New York. And there's some famous restaurants out of the Manhattan that were sued by employees because owners were not paying them tips. So we make sure. I had a situation where this past Friday, I normally am here. This past Friday was one of the few Fridays that I was not here. I had to be traveling on another business matter. Got hung up where I was. Didn't get here until 10:30 at night. So I had to.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to put Donna in control of payroll, and thankfully was able to help her migrate through what needed to be done. But we make sure that if payroll's on Friday, we don't sit there and say, hey, Anthony got hung up on his trip, he'll see you tomorrow.
Right.
They have families to feed, and we want to make sure that, again, I go back to, want to make sure consistency.
Yep.
So we want to make sure consistency in every fashion of our business.
That's
we
right.
don't want a team member to feel that things are starting to become inconsistent with pay. We don't want a team member to think that their schedule is going to be changed each week, because those inconsistencies make people uncomfortable. Just like if the food was inconsistent each week, it would make people say, I really don't want to go back there. So
Absolutely.
Consistency is the hallmark of how we try and run our business.
Exactly. And that is going to undermine the incredible sense of loyalty that your team has.
Yes.
Every single piece contributes to every other piece, so to speak. You're right.
That's correct.
You can't really let any of them drop, because it has ramifications for all the rest, inevitably.
Particularly with payroll, right? I mean, it would have been very easy to sit there and during the pandemic, there were situations where we were, funding out of our own accounts to make sure that everybody was paid, and sorry about that, to make sure everybody was paid. That we knew that they had circumstances where they had families, and I think there's probably an appreciation. I think there is, from the people, our team, that recognize that clearly it was not an easy road, but we are a family-owned business, and we made sure that everyone's families were taken care of.
Absolutely. And again, another reason why you have this cohesion and effectiveness of this entire team. So now it's time in the afternoon to prepare for the onslaught, as
Yes.
you have said on a Friday, that calls for takeout can start as early as 4:45. So your servers have critical responsibilities at that point to prepare.
Correct. They're preparing, for the evening. They're making sure that they have all their tables are set. They're making sure that they're what they call side work, but they're making sure all their cheeses are available, their water pitchers are filled. They're making sure the outdoor seating is available. They're making sure all the heaters work outside as now we get into the fall months. You don't want to start the evening and someone's sitting down at 7:30 and you find out the outdoor heater isn't working at 7:30.
Right.
That's a big pet peeve of mine. I don't have many, but that's one where anticipate what's going to happen for the evening.
Exactly.
Make sure that if that's a problem, maybe that particular heater isn't working because the heaters do break down. Don't seat people over there because it's going to be an uncomfortable evening for them as the weather gets cooler. So it requires, again, I guess I'm fortunate that I don't have to sit there and go through a chart. It gets done as a result of consistency and people understanding what we want to accomplish. So we have a team in place that sits there and they know what their game plan is and they execute the game plan. But also at that particular time the phones are ringing. It's pretty hectic, and we will ask servers who don't have tables in at that particular time to help answer the phones so that we can get all of the starting to get all the to-go and delivery orders into the system, so that this way the kitchen team can prepare those can go out quickly, effectively, and that they're not tied up doing delivery orders when they should be doing table orders. So there's a symmetry to it. I try to say to them, if we can get this first onslaught of deliveries and to go out effectively, quickly, let's get that done so that this way when the first customers start coming in at 6, the kitchen is not tied up doing a delivery. There's a reason for it, right? And it requires precision. It requires someone to sit there and anticipate where the choke points are going to be.
Exactly. And at what point do you have the staff review the specials? And because I know you have talked about that, customers want to know all the details about the food they're about to order.
So what we try to do is we try to have every evening, the specials to the team by 4:30. And we try to explain it to them. And we hope that in our explanation of the special that they are trying to explain it the same way we are. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? If we have a day boat scallops over, a farrow, we want them to be able to explain that it's a day boat scallop. And there's a reason for it. People tend to order when they hear certain trigger words, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wild salmon is better than saying I have a farm-raised salmon, right? Wild or local, using the word local, is another trigger point where people hear that, whether it's because they know effectiveness of how fresh it's going to be because it's local. Mm-hmm. And the alternative also, the people tend to be loyal to knowing that you support local fishermen, local farmers.
Right.
It means something to them. So when we're able to say those things, but that requires description. And in order to describe it properly, you have to sit and say, these are going to be the specials, this is how we're preparing them, this is the ingredients we're using. On our veal, it's a milk-fed veal, that's the best quality, or we have lamb chops on tonight, it's a Colorado rack of lamb. We use domestic lamb here, we don't use New Zealand or Australian, which tends to have more of a gamey taste. It's the best quality lamb. So when we're able to explain that message to our team, our hope is that they're able to effectively carry that message to the customer, who will then say, wow, that was an amazing meal. And too many times I've been out walking, the floor where people say, well, those lamb chops were great. They were so different. They were explaining to me the quality that you guys use. It's the Colorado, and when I hear that, it gives me a sense of accomplishment, knowing that the plan worked. That's part of the plan, and yes, it is the best quality. But the fact that they demonstrated that or described that to you means something to me, because it means that the plan was affected.
Exactly. And then how does, and it still fascinates me how the timing works, where the hostess knows what reservations are coming in when, and has to communicate that to the servers. So how do they figure out how to manage the tables to facilitate turn?
It requires, again, we are very fortunate that we have experienced team members here who have been in this business for quite some time. And it's sort of like figuring out the Rubik's Cube some nights, because you only have a finite number of tables, finite period of time.
Right,
you have to be able to get them in. And so it requires the hostess or the host to be able to go over to the team and say, look, these are the reservations that we have coming in at this particular time. This table here, I need to have it available to me by 7:30. So I'm putting a 5:30 reservation there now.
Okay.
We anticipate that 2 hours is an effective period of time for someone to come in, enjoy themselves, and be able to move on. You're always going to run into problems where people are going to maybe stay a little bit longer, or they got there late.
Right.
And so you have a reservation that's right behind it.
Right.
And sometimes you have to move around and say, okay, I'm going to move them to another table. Or in the alternative, there are no tables available. And then we have to use common sense. And what I say is cover a sin and maybe tell the person, we'd like to buy you a drink at the bar.
Right. Right.
Again, a lot of restaurant owners will sit there and say, it's 7:30 on a Saturday, and they know better, they have to wait. I never subscribed to that, only because I know that a person made a time to come, and I know in my own instance where I would go out to places, and if I saw the wait was too long, you sit there and it just, remember what's happening. A person's coming out to eat at that particular time. Their levels are off for a little bit, right? They're hungry. When someone uses the word hangry, that's the word.
Yes,
so,
yes,
and they start, and that, believe it or not, that becomes the first bad circumstance that they've encountered that night. And sometimes people will just, that'll not only leave, that leave sometimes would be the best thing they could do.
Oh.
What happens is, when they have that first start to the bad experience, now they go in there with a different color observation.
Right.
Everything is bad.
Right.
And no matter what you do, you can't satisfy. So if we're able to diffuse them and say, hey, look, we just made this fresh grandma pizza. We wanted you guys to try it. And we cut it up for them and we put that in front of them. We're at least slowing down the potential issue that could, because they're putting something in their stomach. Or we're buying them a glass of wine and they say, wow, that they recognize that my table wasn't ready and they didn't want me to wait, so they bought me a glass of wine. I just think those are the type of things that you can do in this industry to diffuse potential problems. Sure. And it's so easy to do. And people have this nickel and dime mentality, like, oh, I'm not going to do that. That's my money. No, what you're doing is you're making sure that their experience is great so that they come back the next time.
Exactly, it's an investment.
Yeah, and we had a situation here on Saturday, a couple that was in. Their first time in here was about a year ago when things had first opened up, and they didn't get to their table for an hour. But we had gone above and beyond. We had sent out an appetizer to them. We had sent out a drink. Our bartenders were engaging with them. They now are here all the time, and they reminded me of that circumstance this past Saturday. They said, we remember the first time we were here, he had claimed that they had waited an hour and a half. I thought it was only an hour, but he said, but you guys are just so great here. You guys are so nice, and you guys go out of your way to make sure everyone is happy. And again, that means the plan worked.
That's right.
Right?
Well, then, of course, perhaps the last part of that grand plan is you as master of ceremonies.
Yes, yeah. You got to be a conductor and make sure that everything is choreographed correctly, making sure that one of the biggest things that I try to stay on busy nights, I stay in the kitchen to expedite food. I'm able to see tickets that need to get made in a more expeditious fashion, or a delivery ticket that needs to go out because I could see the timing on it. And so I'm constantly in the kitchen, out by the front where the delivery and to-go orders are.
Right.
And I'll start to anticipate where the problems are. So what could happen with a delivery problem? Well, this is a large piece of real estate that we manage here in terms of the area of delivery. So we have about a 5 or 6 mile radius, but we deliver as far as Round Hill Road in Greenwich. Round Hill Road in Greenwich from here is probably a 15 or 18 minute drive. I've had delivery personnel that have been here that, if no one is directing them, they want to be overzealous and they're going to take 3 deliveries, but they're not looking at the geography. So they think they're going to be able to take a delivery to White Plains or West Harrison and Greenwich. That's just not smart planning. So it requires you to have eyes everywhere, and it requires you to, and it has taken time to explain to the people that are up front, the host and the hostess, to be able to say to them, look, you have to know the map as well as the delivery guys. You have to understand that a Rybrook delivery and a West Harrison delivery are essentially on the opposite sides of the earth. Right. And that if a person is taking a pizza to West Harrison and they think they're going to then take a pizza to Rybrook, the pizza is going to be ice cold. So it's that type of planning that's required. So that's an issue that takes up a lot of my time to make sure that's being done effectively. And then from there, making sure the tables, they're getting their appetizers in a timely fashion. And then the next stage being making sure that the kitchen team is now firing up their entrees. Again, a person not knowing how under the hood works, if you see a crowded restaurant, all you really see is your own table. So you expect your appetizer to come out in a timely fashion, and then when you're finished with your appetizer, you figure your main course is going to come out in a timely fashion. Well, in order for that to happen, there's somebody that has to be back there managing all of these orders. Right. And that is essentially where my role comes into play, where I'm able to sit there and say, okay, table 4 just sat down, this is their appetizers, but they have a porterhouse for 2 for an entree. Well, that's not something that can be made, in a jiffy. Right. So, that if the kitchen team has too many orders and they're expecting me to choreograph which orders are necessary, I have to be able to say, because they can't read all the orders coming in, I have to be the choreographer who says, I need you to get a porterhouse for 2 started as well, so that this way when the appetizers are finished, the steak is cooked and it's able to go out. Otherwise, the person's going to eat an appetizer and they're not going to get the main course until 45 minutes later. So that's the type of timing that is truly required. And again, it's not something that, unless you're watching, Chef Ramsay on those shows, you truly don't understand what really goes into making sure someone's evening is done correctly.
It's incredible, and that's not to mention your personal work on the floor, engaging all the customers.
Right. So that typically what I like to do is, once we're able to get the first rush of orders out the door, I know what's coming behind it, but I try to get out to the floor at that point, make sure everybody was happy. We've added some new personnel recently to our team that I think is really very, very helpful in that manner, because he's able to take some of that load off me for that first rush, so that that I'm not in 5 different places at one time, or in the alternative, that I'm able to spend more time at a table.
Right.
because that's critical as well. It's particularly when it's busy. It's hard when we've got 3 different people that are saying they'd love to see me, and I go over and say, hi, how you doing? I'm walking over to it's not very authentic, right?
Right. It's perfunctory.
I'd rather much more be able to sit there and spend some time and hear how their evening was, but more importantly, just engage them in regular conversation.
Right.
So that's a task, particularly with the first rush. By the second rush, I'm able to do that much more effectively because once that's done, I'm able to go out and I know there's nothing coming behind it. And that's really it. It requires time management from like as we said with these particular days, from Thursday evening through late Saturday evening. All of that requires timing and planning in order to make sure that all goes correctly. It requires an enormous amount of preparation.
And as you remind us, often, one wrong move, one piece out of place, and the whole house of cards can crumble. So, it's hearing what Anthony has been explaining to us, it just hits me that, again, the pressure is unfathomable because everything's at stake, everything's on the line, and you have to go to extraordinary lengths to, again, identify every piece and have them working synergistically. And as you so vividly explained earlier today, one wrong move and it can feel like, it's a disaster. So, it brings to mind your description to me at different times that this business is not for the faint of heart.
Certainly not.
Because this is extraordinarily difficult to pull off successfully.
The statistics of the restaurant industry failures are legendary.
Yes.
And sometimes it starts from the day they sign their lease or they start the business. But a lot of times it's just as a result of not being able to execute the plan effectively or consistently. And that's what consistency requires, you to plan accordingly, and requires you to make sure that everyone leaves happy. And a lot of the restaurants that I believe that fail as a result of not being able to execute a plan because they weren't prepared.
Absolutely. And I feel that it's that way with just about anything, that
Absolutely.
any kind of, especially any kind of performance, as it were, that in order to have that performance appear seamless, effortless,
Correct.
etc., it actually requires an extraordinary amount of preparation and work and
in any business,
organization,
without a doubt.
Up front.
I think there was a statement by Branch Rickey. He was the GM of the Dodgers years ago. He said, luck is the residue of preparation. And
Absolutely.
And that's always something that's reverberated with me in terms of you'll be as lucky as how prepared you are, and
Without question.
And that's something that's important for us here. And I like to think that we have a tremendous team that's able to work effectively.
Yes.
To make sure that our plan goes accordingly.
Absolutely, and they do.
Yes, they do.
So next week, stay tuned because Anthony is going to share with us examples of how he deals with external challenges, and we'll cite certain specific things, even though, of course, throughout all of these videocasts, we've already had a taste of what some of these challenges are. And then we're going to take you chronologically through Anthony's experiences with perhaps the ultimate external challenge, the COVID pandemic. So don't miss it. We're really going to do our best to sort of recreate the time period of the pandemic and tap into Anthony's psychological, emotional, and actual experiences, sort of moment by moment as we go through. So very exciting.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us
Thank you.
today. Don't miss us next week. We look forward to it, and we'll see you then.